Okay, so we're online. I'm just going to wait until we get the participants through. Okay, so start this webinar. Hello and welcome to the UPL webinar on cereal seed and how to make the best choices. My name is Tom Wheelhouse. I'm the technical lead for combinable crops at UPL. Following the season that we've had, where AHDB have reported the UK wheat area to be 9% down and winter barley to be down 18%, we think it's worthwhile that we discuss the issues that this season may have caused and how to get the best from your seed for the upcoming season. With seed being the starting point of the entire season, making the best decisions with regards to variety, seed treatment and processing of that seed can set the crop up to be successful for the year ahead. And through this webinar, we're going to look at the pressures the season has placed on seed stocks for this autumn, the industry's approach to seed health, opportunities for targeted crop nutrition and what biostimulants and biosolutions have to offer, and some key recommendations for this autumn and beyond. During the webinar, there will be some polls to see the choices that growers are making for their seed, and these will pop up on the screen. And please do type any questions you have into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try to answer them as we go. Any questions that we do get that are not answered during the webinar will be answered by the panelists and sent out for an email following the webinar. And we do have a basis code to go along with this webinar, and it will be appearing in the Q&A, so do stay tuned for that. Joining me on this webinar, I've got two experienced members of the seed industry. We've got Lee Bennett from RAGT Seeds and David Leeper from Agri. So Lee, please could you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Tom. Hi there, I'm Lee Bennett. I'm the Managing Director of RAGT Seeds. Just a little bit about them. So they are a French-owned breeding company. They're owned by French farmers, so we have a very cooperative nature, but with a global presence. So we breed 32 different species of different agricultural seeds on every continent on the globe, which we have a research and a commercial presence on all four corners of the planet.
Thank you very much. David, could you?
Great. Thank you, Tom. I'm David Leeper. I'm Seed Technical Specialist with Agri. Agri is one of the joint biggest seed companies in the UK with over 50,000 tonnes of cereal seed production and over 50,000 tonnes of farm-safe seed processing. So we're very big in seed supply on a national basis. And my responsibility is to help decide which varieties we should be growing along with my commercial colleagues, and also supporting our seed and seed treatment businesses.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll start this webinar. Look at the season that we've had currently. So following the current season with the terrible climatic conditions that we've endured this year, AHDB have recently reported that wheat areas are down on average 9% and barley down 12%, and some areas such as the northwest down as much as 20%. I was just wondering if you could give your experience of this season, David.
Well, I think from a seed production point of view, it's been very challenging. As farmers know, a lot of their fields didn't get planted because of the awful autumn and spring conditions that we saw. And as seed producers, we're in very much the same boat. So the national crop is down, the seed crop is similarly affected. And in some ways, it does tend to affect new varieties more than it does old, because with big mainstay varieties in the UK, we've got quite wide distribution of seed growers across the country. With the newer varieties, of course, there are fewer fields and they're more exposed. So some of those varieties we hope to get planted didn't get planted. So there is a real pressure on seed supply this autumn.
Okay, Lee, do you see this season as having an impact on variety choice and availability?
Personally, I can't wait for this season to end. I can actually give you some statistics in and around what David says. So when you talk about the HDB figures are down on wheat for 9%, the wheat area is down 8.3, the seed area of wheat versus last year. And it's overall it's down 17.1% against the previous 4-year average. On winter barley, that's actually down 15.3% on the previous year in terms of seed area, and 19% down on the previous 4-year average. Oats were always behind anyway. Oats are notoriously a very difficult thing to get grown in terms of seed production, because the go-to cereal of choice in a first cereal situation is always going to be wheat. So convincing people to grow seed crops of oats as a first cereal is a difficult ask. But that's down 39.7% over the 4-year average. So seed is going to be tight. And just to give you one final stat on that, is that this is the lowest recorded seed multiplication area since 1991, when records began. In 1991, we were multiplying 62,900 hectares of wheat seed. This year, we're down at 24,300. So, yeah, we're in uncharted territory when it comes to seed supply this time.
Okay, thank you. So I move on to a point I have is, if there is a shortage seed, how do you see that being backfilled this season? People may not be able to get the varieties they want, or yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think firstly, before we talk about that, I think we've got to remember there's a proportion of seeds sitting on farm at the moment. I mean, it does vary nationally. I mean, it's not as big as we've seen in previous years, because farmers have generally tried to get on and plant, and those crops have been lost after drilling, but some didn't get drilled. And of course, often farmers will go into the early spring and attempt to drill winter cereals into winter wheat into January and into February. But even then, the soil conditions are against most farmers. So there is seed on farm. Well, we don't think it's massive, but it can have a regional impact, because there are certainly areas of the country where the soil conditions were really poor all the way through the year.
We can do a poll and look at how much people have seeds still on farm, that and look at and see what is actually out there. So if we could put that poll up now, please. If you could select, if you got less than 10% or 10% or more, or if you have no seed left on the farm at all, we can have a look and see what's out there still.
I mean, while people are answering that question, I think it's important, if you do have seed on farm, don't just use it, as the first variety you drill. That variety may have been destined for late drilling last autumn, and therefore it's more suited to that drilling slot. So make sure that if you have seed on farm, make sure you put the right variety in the right place this autumn. So don't just rush to use it up. But of course, the other important factor is to make sure you've got it tested ahead of time to make sure the germinations are holding. And if they're not holding, adjust proportionately for that loss through increasing seed rates.
Okay. So we've got the answers in, and we do actually have a bit of a split on some people, 40% having no seed left at all, and 40% having 10% or more, with 20% with less than 10%. But there's obviously quite a few with more than 10% still out there on farm. And I think it's clear what you say about make sure you use the right seed in the right place. Okay, so
I suppose the other question that you had was, how do you backfill for that? Now, of course, growers will have their own crops in the ground. Those varieties were chosen for the right reasons last year. And even though those crops may not have been drilled with the intention of farm saving, of course, growers can decide to save a proportion of their growing crop 4-seed this autumn if they can't get the right variety. So I think farmers should have that in the back of their mind to give a sort of safety valve for seed supply this autumn. And okay, it may not have been intentionally drilled for farm saving, but it's there's an opportunity to get the best bit of the field, ensure that any problem weeds are absent, certainly wild oats and cleavers, those sorts of weeds that will go into the seed sample. Blackgrass is less of a problem because we can screen that out, but make sure that you store it separately. Don't dry it overly, and ensure that you get it tested prior to drilling. Any other suggestions, Lee, that you might have?
Well, it seems like you're just making a blatant plug for farm saving, David.
Not at all.
I want to raise the flag for the certified seed trade. So having done this for a long time, the habit that you tend to see reflected when you get seasons like this is that people tend to go more to certified seed than they do farm saved. So that's going to create extra pressure. We've had a shocking growing season. There's no two bones about it. And when we talk about available crops, I mean, the crops that I have as a plant breeder, they are unique, they are irreplaceable. So if we don't get those produced, that is the end of 10 years of work in terms of creating that variety. So I can recall last autumn when we were trying to get our production stocks out of breeders and pre-basic seed, that ground that was designated to do that was just not fit. So quite wisely, I said, well, let's just drill all the spring ground because it's bound to come good in the spring, and we can plant all the spring crops on what is the heavier ground that we're destined for winter crops. Well, yeah, in hindsight, that's such a fantastic decision not to have made, but hey-ho, we got everything planted. But that's kind of reflective of what's happened as the national picture. I think the important bit to note here is we've got a very, very small UK commercial wheat crop, and we've also got the complication of SFI in the mix now. And I would put out there that the default position for most arable farmers is I'm going to grow wheat. And I can't see SFI being a distraction from people doing that. Whereas SFI is an alternative to growing oilseed rape, which is a crop that's everyone seems to want to hate right now. I can see that, but there's less risk with growing a wheat crop. And that tends to be the default behavior. So my forecast is that the wheat area is going to recover. Right now, it's about 1.56 million hectares. And the long-term average, we tend to run about a 1.8 million hectare crop. Is people are going to try and get back to that figure of 1.8 million hectares. And if sowing conditions are with them, then that's going to be the target for I would say UK agriculture is an increased wheat crop, which is putting greater demand on seed supply. But, and this is a big but, the certified seed trade has been grossly oversupplied for many, many years. And there's been a lot of seed that goes unsold. It tends to be the second choice varieties, but it's still seed nonetheless. It's still capable of growing a crop. And I would propose that any variety that makes it as far as commercial multiplication is a credible variety nonetheless. It might not be the most elite, but it's still very, very credible. So there's going to be seed available, despite increased demand and despite a smaller multiplication area. Farm Save there is there for the habitual farm savers, or to bridge the gap should you not get your first choice variety and you're already growing it. One big thing that I've always found, is kind of the whole point of certified seed is you're getting what you pay for, and with it, you're getting a free warranty. If you have any problem with your resultant crop, you have a retailer merchant that supplied that seed that you can make a phone call to and say, I've got problems. With Farm Save seed, you're on your own.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, that's a very good point. I do wonder if we could ask another poll here in relation to Farm Save seed, and just see whether people are planning on using it this year or using it more or for the first time this time. And maybe while that poll goes up, I have had question. Do you think the knee-jerk reaction would be to drill the seed that didn't get drilled last year, and i.e. the later drills first, since it's already in farm, and what would be the implications of that? I don't know if, David, you'd like to go first on that? Or...
I think I mean, it all depends very much on the variety that you have on farm, because a majority of varieties suit the main drilling window, but there are certainly some varieties and some big acreage varieties like X-Days, which is more suited to later drilling, that you know, it would be unwise to rush in and drill it early simply because you've got the seed on the farm. You can understand the emotion around that, but you know, we've got varieties in sequence drilling sort of programs for a reason. Some are slow in their development and some are much faster in their development. So they need positioning in the right place. But it's fair to say the majority of varieties will sit within the main drilling window quite happily.
Okay. So that poll has come back. Look, so most people are saying that they don't see an increase in the use of farm safe seed, with some actually saying they plan to use it for the first time this year. That could be because of the of what we've just mentioned and the reduced areas. Okay, so would you like to, should we move on to seed health now? And you talk about the seed health in the UK and what the priorities should be, looking at the diseases in particular.
Do you want to pick that up?
Thanks for the hospital pass. Yeah, I'll have a go. That's kind of a moving feast, Tom. Right now, with a pattern of weather we've been having, absolutely locked in the front of my mind is fusarium, without a doubt. But you know, we're looking at reducing quality all the time, and that doesn't matter whether it's a commercial crop or a seed crop. They're all up against it, and we've got the perfect storm, no pun intended, in terms of creating fusarium. So, to my mind, I would not, irrespective of what the test come back as, I would see in this situation that a rudimentary single-purpose treatment would be non-negotiable in my mind on this. You know, let's be very crucial about what we're doing here. You are setting your crop up for the season. You're setting up one annual life cycle of your income stream. And you can, if you get it all wrong on day one, then you know you're going to spend more money recovering it, and if you can't recover it, then it's hurting bottom line. And again, when we talk about free or very cheap insurances, that's one that I just would not be without. Obviously, you've got the other things that are less weather dependent, like seed-borne bunts and you know, smuts in barley and so on and so forth, which never really go away. But front and centre of my mind this season is fusarium above all things.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that, you know, fusarium goes up and down, generally driven by the weather patterns at flowering and post-flowering, and is increased by dull, wet conditions throughout the grain filling period. But, you know, these other diseases are called hidden diseases because they're not often seen. They're present at low levels, but a lot of work done back in the 90s and early 2000s showed that they have such a huge ability to multiply that within 3 seasons they can reach a problem where they're not just affecting yield, they may be affecting quality to the point that you get crop rejection. So it's sort of contentious in some ways, because seed treatments are probably one of the few areas of crop protection where there's a routine use of seed treatment. And that's largely within the certified seed system, because we are delivering good quality seed to the market. We're looking at maintaining purity of the varieties, but ensuring plant health. So 99% of what goes through certified seed is treated with a base fungicide or a fungicide treatment. Now in farm safe seed, you know, farmers maybe have more options. They've got more time on their side with their samples, but even then we see 90% use of base fungicides to control both those seed-borne and importantly, soil-borne pathogens that are on farm. So, you know, there is a move with the regenerative farming lobby to move away from the routine use of fungicide treatments, but actually the market is very much behind the use of those treatments at the moment.
The other thing on that, David, is you know, we know some of these diseases, bunt especially, is both seed and soil borne, and which is the chicken and which is the egg.
Indeed.
You know, so if you're using untested seed and untreated seed that is containing seed-borne bunt, and that ultimately becomes the bank that creates soil-borne bunt, you're making a legacy for years to come.
Indeed, indeed.
We have had a question that does actually ask what tests should they people be doing for the seed that they have on farm. I don't know if you want to cover that, David, as to what, if you were testing, what you would look for.
Well, I think clearly germination is the main thing, and actually the certified seed trade generally use germination as an indicative indication of disease, particularly fusarium, because if you have fusarium present on the seed, it affects germination directly. So anything showing poor germination, we will generally either test for disease or we'll routinely treat that before the germination test just to show what the effect of disease is having. So certainly germination. I mean, there are many people looking at other tests, and certainly if you are looking at disease levels on farm, you can get test results through official testing stations back for the likes of loose smut, bunt, and things like leaf stripe. So, you know, there are tests in place that will allow you to gauge the seed health, but mostly the germination and viability of the seed.
Okay, and on that note, we've got another question that's asking how long do those tests normally take to get back? I guess thinking in mind of how quickly someone might be going back to drill again and want to know how soon they can have that seed tested.
Well, I think the turnaround time is generally, including postage and results back, is generally assumed to be about, well, 10 days for a disease test. You can get indicative tests of germination very quickly, but they are only indicative tests. But they do take, you know, a week to 10 days really to get a full test through. And obviously within certified seed businesses where we've got multiple crops coming in from multiple farms of different varieties, which is all very complex in terms of the logistics and turnaround time, that does add a delay in. And that's one of the reasons, but not the only reason, why we're routinely treating seed, because the complexity of managing treated versus non-treated seed is actually quite significant.
Okay, thank you. And whilst we were talking there, we do have another question actually. What should people be looking for in their SPDs? Is there do you think there's an awareness out there between the different treatments?
Do you want to answer that, Lee?
Well, I think Tom, you should answer that yourself. That's your specialist area, not ours.
So yeah, well, I think that people definitely should be considering the treatments that they require, looking at the diseases that may be out in the fields that they have, and making sure they have a robust single-purpose dressing that's suitable for what they need. So yeah, I think definitely people should be aware of what they're treating, and make sure you do ask for what you want on your seed. I think there's a lot of people that just say they'll have an SPD, but not really know, or a single-purpose dressing, but not really think about what they're actually going for. So yeah, okay. So I think covered quite a lot there with seed health and seed testing. We have a look at nutrition, and can you talk about the use of nutritional seed treatments and what the priorities should be for growers there? David, if you start there, please.
Well, I think, I mean, we have a long history, you know, particularly in things like barley, and particularly in spring barley, where those crops have historically been grown on soils where there's either a deficiency of nutrients or lack of availability, often due to pH and other factors, of using nutritional seed treatments, manganese particularly in that situation. But we have seen over the last number of years, huge number of offers looking at either straight products or combinations, low-level cocktails, if you like, of a mix of micronutrients to provide a boost of nutrition around the seed. And so I think if you look at the market, there's any number of those products. I think it's only, and we can only really talk, I can only talk for the products that I've tested myself, but there is a strong case for using early nutrition and you know, what could be more effective than applying nutrition immediately around the seed? We have this hunger gap, this gap between the germination and the early seedling and the stage where the seedling gets sufficient root development and root hairs to explore the soil. We've got that hunger gap, which is filled by these nutritional products. So providing a pool of nutrition does show immediate benefits in terms of a stimulation to growth, and we often see a small but significant benefit in autumn biomass and rooting. And actually, quite remarkably, we can see the effects going right through the season. Admittedly, the benefits in terms of yield are small because there are other factors at play, of course, through the crop's life. But we typically see a range of results, but they can be quite big. They can obviously be little or nothing, but we're normally seeing about 0.2 to 0.3 tons per hectare benefit from a high load nutrient. So we're using high load manganese, for example, and we've seen that both in wheat and barley, both winter and spring, across soil types, which, you know, which moves us away from the traditional thinking that it's only these soils where there's deficiency or lack of availability. And I would say that based on the results that I've seen over the last 8 years, routine use of high load nutrition more than covers its cost across soils and all situations.
Thank you. I think that will prompt a lot of people to go down to use nutrition, but can we run a poll and see how many people are actually using nutrition currently? If you could just select whether you're using it or whether you've not even considered it previously. But I guess a key point would be, what level do they have to yield to cover their own costs? Maybe David, that might be again for yourself.
Well, I think from the work that I've done for the products that we sell, you need to yield literally only 100 kilos a hectare to cover the cost of treatment. I mean, we're remembering these are applied to a ton of seed. The unit dose per seed is small, but the net benefits are more than, you know, it's a 3-to-1 cost benefit in many respects.
Okay.
That's what we've seen over 8 years.
Right. Okay. So, so the answers there have come up, and so I guess it's more towards not using stimulant, nutrition, and then 33% have never considered this either. So, but I think the points you gave will definitely prompt people to use that. Is there anything you'd like to add on nutrition at all, Lee? On your thoughts on seed?
I was just about to call rechristen Dave Snake Oil Dave until he saved himself with the word manganese. You know, we should never forget the role manganese has to play. It's the only trace element, so it's required in such small quantities, but in a deficient situation, it is the only single trace element that will cause crop death. And if we wind ourselves back to last autumn, I saw a lot of crops go backwards at quite a rate of knots because people could not travel to put manganese on. And I think that is just a good insurance. Again, it's an insurance, but in the right situation, so identifying the soil type and you'll know your background pH status. So these manganese prone situations, that again would be for me a total no-brainer. And beyond that, look at, you know, all the other things, the phosphites, the endophytes, the Daxane, and so on and so forth, or what extra thing they might bring to the party on top of that. But always manage your deficiencies first.
Okay, great. And yeah, and it's such a targeted application as well with the seed treatment there.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you mentioned the biostimulants there, can you talk a bit about biostimulants and treatments as a way to boosting that early growth and root growth? Maybe if we go with Lee again on there.
I think you're asking the wrong man the wrong question, really. I've changed hats, Tom. I'm kind of not in that world anymore.
Okay, David, please.
I think it's, I mean, it is a really topical question, biostimulants, biosolutions as well, and the contribution they have. Now, of course, the backdrop of this is that we are facing the loss of traditional chemistry, and particularly, you know, fungicide chemistry, which has proven its worth over, well, since mercury was banned in the late 80s. We're now seeing reduced registrations, withdrawals upcoming for some key seed treatments, and that is a risk for the future. And, you know, it's clear that that gap is being filled by a range of products which are more natural, perhaps, or they're plant derivatives, and they offer an opportunity in the future, perhaps, to control pests and diseases, but short term they're being used to look at what they can provide in terms of stimulation to the crop. So we've had, as Lee mentioned very briefly, we have things like phosphites for the last decade and a half, which are chemical stimulants, and they provide a boost to that early growth. 7 or 8 years ago, we saw the introduction of Sedaxane from Syngenta, and that's being co-applied with fludarabinol to provide both disease control, but this an early boost to plant growth. And to be fair, Syngenta produced a really excellent data package looking at the benefits on early root development, increased autumn and spring biomass, and a benefit through to yield. So, you know, quite compelling information. I think the interesting thing, though, some of these biostimulants produce bigger effects in the autumn, and no doubt they set the crop better up in the autumn for those reasons I've just said. But some of those benefits, again, are dissipated as we go through the year. So in harvest, the benefits are often similar to those that I've already mentioned about micronutrients. So they're on that sort of par. The one thing we have seen with Sedaxane biostimulants, that they can increase establishment, particularly at higher seed rates in really tough autumn conditions. And that's just where blackgrass is a problem. You know, if we're drilling at 300, aiming to get 300 plants, say, established in late drilled wheat, in an attempt to reduce the effects of blackgrass, or on areas where there's blackgrass, we have seen a significant increase in establishment and the competitiveness of that wheat crop against blackgrass, which is quite significant. We've also seen situations where those crops with that biostimulant go into a dry spring, and the significant improvement in rooting confers better drought tolerance. So there are many peripheral benefits for these biostimulants that we're seeing across the board. Now, those two, phosphites and Sedaxane, are chemical treatments. We've seen more recently the introduction of products like Nuelo-In and Newton, which again are endophytes or plant-derived peptides. So these are biosolutions, and of course Sunagreen from UPL. And these products are have different benefits. And again, generally the effects are improvements in establishment, improvements in rooting, and a benefit through to yield. But again, the real benefits are generally relatively small.
Okay. Thank you. We have had a question on where do we, as growers, find the data to show us why we should be further using Biostim? I guess the manufacturers are sending that out to the agronomists, and the agronomists will advise on where to use that. But do you have any points on that, David or Lee?
Well, I think we will have our own trials. As Agri, we have a national network of trials. We are testing for both varieties and seed treatments through a national network of R&D. So we have our view. Obviously, we don't test everything, but I think it's fair to say over the last 20 or more years where we've tested things at our network, there's only the occasion, there's a lot of claims are made, but there's only the occasional product where they're actually reality. So I think you need to dig deep and get some information back by your distributor or direct from the manufacturer.
Okay. And a further question relating to this also be, would it be worth retreating my current undrilled seed with a Biostim seed treatment to improve its germination? I guess that may be seed that's already gone through a processor and with a straight SPD. But
I mean, my comment would be I would firstly get it tested to see what the germination is. I personally, given the autumn conditions this year, we're likely to see, wet seed beds. It very much depends on the next few weeks and when you're going to drill it. But I think putting recleaned seed into poor soil conditions late in the year, the biggest benefit will be from a base treatment. Now, of course, you will not get any fungicidal effect from a biostimulant, but again, I would recommend that you apply an extra stimulation to growth. My suggestion would be, a high load nutrient or a biostimulant to go alongside base treatment.
Okay. And we did have a question that whilst we were on nutrients, and maybe we could just go back to that. I have some seed left from last year. Could I have the manganese added onto it this year? And would I be better drilling this seed elsewhere or and obtaining new seed for my manganese prone soils? I guess David, again, that's probably towards yourself.
Well, I think it's the right variety, the right treatment for the right situation. So I would say if you are going onto deficient soils, you could put that through and have it over-treated. We can over-treat seed, but obviously that's subject to available seed processing resources, that would come out and do that. But it would make sense if it's going on to a deficient or a soil which is showing lack of availability. Yeah, certainly.
Okay. So if we're looking again at this autumn and beyond, would you be able to sort of summarize what you'd recommend for this season? What recommendations you'd give listeners in terms of seed and seed treatments? Maybe Lee, if you start with your seed.
So my first one is, if you're sat on unused certified seed, get it tested. And there's only one reliable way of testing germination on treated seed, and that's a long germ, which will take 10 to 12 days. But you sat on that stock now. That's a job you can get done before harvest starts. So you've got the result. If you are going to farm save, know what you're dealing with. And again, I would encourage everyone to do nothing but a true long germ test, and also get the fusarium tested, which again is causing a time lag. It's a 10-12 day process at least, and we're staring down the barrel of a late harvest. So there's not a lot of time, not a lot of slack in terms of timeliness to get all these processes done. If your decision is, I'm not a farm saver, and I have no over-yeared seed that I didn't manage to drill that last autumn. I think you need to be talking to your merchant now. I would predict that most first choice varieties are very thin on the ground. But yeah, your second choice is never that far away from your first choice one. There'll be some varieties that are completely unavailable in terms of over-yeared seed if you wanted an early start. So Skyfall, for instance, just spot the blatant plug, because that's one winter wheat that you can drill into March. So there is no Skyfall anywhere. It's all going to come from new season harvest. So again, there's no carryover of certain varieties because of the nature of the season that we're just coming out of. So we've got a fairly unusual set of circumstances, but what you've got to do is remember you're setting up your next 12 months income stream. Don't get it wrong from day one, and just a little bit of thought now in terms of knowing what I'm dealing with will always pay dividends.
Okay, David.
Well, I think the other thing we need to think this autumn, as Lee said, we're heading towards a late harvest if conditions carry on like this. I think the gut reaction from last year will be farmers will not wanting to be holding off drilling. So, people will be looking to get on with drilling. So the turnaround time is quick. But I think that we have to add a note of caution that, we've moved away from early drilling in large areas of England, particularly because of grass weeds. And we have seen a lot of grass weeds on farm, blackgrass and ryegrass particularly, and we don't want to jump too quick. Now, we know that wheat is a poor competitor against blackgrass. So where you're looking to drill early, let's not rush in with wheat. Let's be sensible, particularly where blackgrass is a problem. Where you've got moderate levels of blackgrass, hybrid barley is a good way of maintaining that population and not increasing that population. But where you've come out a situation with high weed burden of blackgrass, the evidence overwhelming over the last decade or more is that move to spring cropping, take that land. So don't rush in just because the land is available and you want to put in wheat. We know spring barley is better than winter barley and spring oats are better still. So right crop, right place, and then right variety. We know some varieties are more competitive than others. So we know hybrid barley is more competitive than two-row barley, and certain wheat varieties are more competitive than others. But those are marginal benefits. The effect of crop is much more pronounced.
But within that, if you are, if you've got a variety that is competitive against blackgrass, and your decision is to sow early, you're creating more pressure. That variety in its own right has still got to be suited to that early sowing slot, and they are few. They're not the many. They are very, very few. So a bit of very salient advice on variety choice, I think, would be really appropriate this season.
Maybe I can just also comment on things like take-all, because of course the weak acreage is down. A lot of second wheats didn't get planted last year because they tend to go in that bit later anyway. But we have had conditions this year where we've seen high levels of moisture in the soil and, more importantly, warm soil temperatures right through the autumn and winter and early spring periods. And we've had ongoing moisture and warm soils ever since. And those conditions are ideal for the buildup of the take-all pathogen in first wheats. So it's not going to show itself necessarily in first wheats, but may lead to this being a high take-all build year. So I think anybody planning on second wheats, the sensible advice would be to delay drilling there again. And the evidence suggests that middle of October is the optimum drilling for second and third wheats. If you one to bring that further, you would be strongly advised to apply Latitude as the only take-all active product. But some farmers may choose to use Sidaxane and fludarabinol as an alternative, but the evidence does show that take-all control is probably the seed treatment that gives the biggest yield response of any of the treatments available in the UK market. So take-all build's important. Timing for blackgrass situations of drilling is important, and variety choice, as Lee says, is an important character.
Okay, great, thank you. And I have had a few more questions come in, linking to these, what we should be doing this season. And there's a question here: would it be worthwhile getting seed treater for wheat bulb fly this year? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it depends on your previous position. If you've got bare ground, you know, in August, which is exactly where the bulb fly will lay eggs, then absolutely. I mean, this, to my mind, mainly occurs in my region, either where you followed vining peas and they've been taken early, or in sugar beet crops, where in July, where we normally get a drought, if you can remember those days, and the sugar beet doesn't, it kind of collapses in the row. So you've got lots of bare soil between the rows of sugar beet, and they'll be attracted to that. Now, this year, I don't know anyone that's irrigated anything this season. So the sugar beet crops will be full. But if you've got bare ground and you think that, you know, bulb fly is a threat, let's face it, there's no foliar follow-up like there used to be when the organophosphate sprays were around as insecticides that would give you good control, like Dursban. So you've only got one shot at it, and that is seed treatment now. And if you get bulb fly and you didn't treat, you can't recover that position.
Okay, thank you. And David, do you have
Well, I agree. I think that, as Lee said, it's bare ground in August that's the issue. Now, of course, there is a lot of bare ground. You know, there's over wintered fallow. There's lots of crops that fail to be established, and indeed many big crops that you see commonly around that will be exposed. Whether I mean, I was out on the fens of Lincolnshire yesterday, and there's a lot of those sort of patches, but whether or not we've broken the cycle of wheat bulb fly, it's difficult to know. But I think as a precaution, especially if you're going late drill, is to use signal seed treatment, no doubt.
Great, thank you. Well, we don't have any more questions, and I think we've come to the end of the topics that we were going to discuss. I'd just like to thank you both very much for joining this webinar, and thank you for everyone listening in. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye for now.
Bye now.